Breaking news 19 of 5. America's NATO shuffle is sending mixed signals across Europe. Washington says troop movements are routine. Europe hears something else. For years, Europe's security architecture rested on a simple assumption. When uncertainty rises, the United States shows up with more troops, more weapons, and more guarantees. This week, that assumption became harder to read. The Trump administration announced plans to send an additional 5,000 U.S. troops to Poland, only days after canceling a separate deployment of 4,000 troops to the same country and simultaneously pulling forces out of Germany. The contradictory moves left NATO allies struggling to answer a basic question. What exactly is Washington's strategy in Europe right now? At a NATO foreign ministers meeting in Sweden, U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio attempted to calm growing anxiety. American troop deployments, he argued, are constantly being adjusted to reflect global priorities, especially as tensions in the Middle East continue to demand military resources. Technically, Rubio is right. Militaries reposition forces all the time. Politically, however, Europe sees something larger happening. Europe's real fear isn't about Poland. The real concern inside NATO is not whether 5,000 troops move east or west. It is whether the United States is slowly redefining its role in Europe altogether. Since Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine in 2022, European governments have depended heavily on American military backing. U.S. troops stationed in Germany, Poland, Italy, and the UK became more than just military assets. They became psychological guarantees that Washington would remain committed to European security. Now, under Trump's renewed America First doctrine, that guarantee suddenly feels conditional. And Europe notices the pattern. Trump has repeatedly criticized NATO allies for relying too heavily on U.S. protection while underinvesting in their own militaries. At the same time, frustration inside Washington has grown after several European countries refused to fully support U.S. actions during the recent confrontation with Iran. To many European officials, the troop reshuffling looks less like military planning and more like political messaging. Support America's priorities, or prepare for a smaller American footprint. Poland wins influence while Germany loses leverage. The contrast between Poland and Germany is especially revealing. Germany remains America's largest military hub in Europe, hosting more than 36,000 active-duty U.S. troops. Yet relations between Berlin and Washington have become increasingly tense, particularly after disagreements over Middle East policy. Poland, meanwhile, has positioned itself as one of Trump's closest European allies. President Karol Nawrocki openly aligns himself with Washington's conservative nationalist agenda and has consistently pushed for a stronger U.S. military presence on Polish soil. The result is a geopolitical rebalancing inside NATO itself. Eastern European countries closer to Russia are gaining strategic importance, while traditional Western European powers are discovering that access to American protection may no longer be automatic. That shift could permanently reshape the alliance over the next decade. NATO's biggest problem is no longer Russia. Ironically, NATO today appears less divided about Russia than about America. Russia remains the external threat that keeps the alliance together. But uncertainty surrounding U.S. commitment has become the alliance's deepest internal vulnerability. European governments are now confronting uncomfortable questions they spent decades avoiding. Can Europe defend itself without the United States? How much American unpredictability can NATO absorb? And if Washington increasingly treats alliances as transactional, what does collective defense actually mean anymore? Marco Rubio tried to reassure allies in Sweden. But reassurance is becoming harder to deliver when U.S. foreign policy changes direction every few days. The bigger picture. What we are witnessing may not be a temporary diplomatic confusion. It may be the early stages of a post-American NATO. Not a collapse of the alliance, but a gradual transition where Europe is forced to carry more of its own military burden while the United States shifts attention toward domestic politics, China, and the Middle East. For decades, NATO's strength came from predictability. Today, unpredictability may be the real story, and Europe knows it. Subscribe for more breaking global news and sharp geopolitical analysis.